You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
The boys are back in town. Nick Wilson, Spencer German. Hey there, hi there, ho there. Just a reminder, please make sure to rate, follow, and subscribe to the Sons of the Shoe podcast everywhere you get your podcasts. Want to thank everybody. The Michigan post-game show was our most viewed post-game show we've had to this point and our most viewed show. We appreciate the love and support out of you guys. We actually went through and read a bunch of your YouTube comments and kind of interacted there. So if you interacted, you didn't see it, let us know because we were having some fun there. But Spencer, we are now several days removed from the Michigan loss, and I just want to start here. I know we got a lot to get into today, but has the rage, has the anger, has the disappointment simmered down for you at all?
No. I honestly think it's worse. Here's why, and I'll tell you, like, the last 2 years sucked of losing when Ohio State was favored and all these different things. But I honestly think because those games turned into blowouts and they weren't as close, I almost was able to get over them and like look back and be like, what are you going to do? And just laugh about it. Like, yeah, they got us. Yeah. They really dropped the ball on that one. But this one hurts more because there's so many little moments that keep popping up on my Twitter feed where I'm like, if that goes differently, maybe they win the game. If this goes differently, maybe they win the game. Like I've honestly, like, I usually go back and sometimes watch these games again too, just to like, get it out of my system. I can't go back and watch this one right now. I don't know if I'll ever go back and watch it, but this one still hurts. Like, yeah, I keep seeing the interception, the Kyle McCord interception that sealed the game pop up on my feed. And you realize I saw like a still frame where it was like, if he gets this ball, if the pressure doesn't get to him, if Jackson, I think was the lineman that let him through, that let the pass rusher through, if he holds up just a second longer, like I think he probably gets it to Marvin Harrison Jr. And I honestly think he breaks it for a touchdown because there was like nobody even in the vicinity. Like he would have turned it upfield and had a good shot at scoring. It's just the little things like that are just driving me insane several days later when you realize how close this one actually was. And that's the other part of it too, was those other games. Yeah, Ohio State was favored. They probably should have won all these different things. This one, it was like resoundingly Michigan was the favorite coming in from Vegas and all these different things. Everybody assumed that Michigan was just the outright better team all season. They were going to boat race Ohio State, and Ohio State hadn't really played anybody. That's what they kept trying to use that argument the same way we were using against Michigan, and ended up being basically a very evenly matched game that came down to just a few moments here or there. Like that infuriates me more than anything. So I actually feel worse about it than I did on Saturday.
For a lot of the reasons you just said, I actually feel better about the loss. Like, listen, it's a kick in the balls. There's just no other way around it. And like, I acknowledge that there's no way I'll ever fully accept a loss to Michigan in the same way that I don't think a Michigan fan accepts whether it's a 50-point loss or a 1-point loss. So I think the reality is it's a kick in the pants and I don't like it. But like, I think the fact it was such a close game tells you how evenly matched these teams were. I actually think that should bode well for Ohio State's playoff chances. I know ESPN has them at like a 50% playoff chance. And there's something weird, and we'll get into this more in the show. There's also something weird that I think there just might be a really good chance this is the year we get the Ohio State-Michigan national title game, assuming that Ohio State's won and Georgia, they have to go through Georgia again to get there. Yeah. But like this would be the year that it happens, given all the insane crap that happened off the field. But overall, like it was like 3 moments in that game that lost the game. The blame doesn't change, but like I think if you're Ohio State, I think you have to look at this and say they were the more highly thought of team going into this game. They were the favorite. they were a significant favorite and they had the better quarterback. And honestly, you had a chance to go down and win the game at the very last drive. Like that's really like all you can ask. So I think if these two teams played again, I don't think it's a guarantee that Michigan wins, especially in the idea of like a neutral site playoff. So like, yeah, it sucks. And all the conversations we're having on Ryan Day, all the conversations we're having at the Ohio State program in general are still valid. But like, I think the closeness and how evenly matched it felt and how much it really is. Like if you take if Kyle McCord doesn't throw that interception early in the game, guys, I think they win. Like it's as simple as your quarterback had two boneheaded turnovers, and that's what happens when your quarterback turns it over twice, their quarterback doesn't. And the idea was still a one score game.
Yeah,
and you had a chance late in that game. So I still feel crappy about it, but I don't feel as crappy. I don't feel as the sky is falling, which I think does make me the anomaly because I have heard a lot, both in Columbus, in Cleveland on our station, just, the nebulous social media Buckeye crowd, that it sure feels like everybody feels like the sky is falling.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the sky is falling. Like Ohio State, I wouldn't say I feel like when I say I feel worse about it, I'm not looking at it as like it's all over. Ohio State's garbage. It's all downhill from here. Listen, they're number 2 in terms of recruiting classes coming in next year. Like it's going to be fine. Like I'll get over it eventually. You'll start next season considered a heavy favorite in most games again, and maybe even the Michigan game because they're going to lose a whole bunch of people. They have so many guys who are seniors or grad students or whatever that are going to be graduating, or not even graduating, but just moving on or going to the NFL in general. So yeah, like it's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. I tell myself that, but I just think you're right. Like the fact that to me, the losses where there are just a few moments are always harder than the ones where it's just like a blowout and you can kind of look back and laugh on it. And to point it, yeah, the interception early in the game, I think that's obviously a big key moment that changed because now you're playing from behind rather than playing from ahead. Like that you wanted to put Michigan kind of on their heels and make them play from behind. You didn't do that. That set you back. I guess some people maybe argue the touchdown interception controversy thing. We both agreed it was a touchdown, but that's maybe a play that gets thrown in there. I think the end of the half, Ryan Day basically puckering up and not going for an easier field goal, almost treating it like he's in the NFL and he has a kicker that's going to nail a 52-yarder. That was bizarre. I actually honestly think too, Nick, if you want to go back to even the first drive of the game, not going for it on 4th and 1, which this was another painful thing I saw on my Twitter feed, by the way, that apparently Xavier Johnson on the play that ended it short on that exact drive, short of the first down, his knee actually wasn't down. So he actually reached the first down marker, but the refs spotted him short. So that one stung because then it was like, well, then that's a whole different drive that you're talking about in the opening drive of the game. But I even thought in that moment, like we talked about it on Saturday, man, Ryan Day says he's going to be aggressive and you had a chance to be aggressive right out of the gate and go for it. And I get it. Like you don't want to chase things early or whatever, but I thought that was a way to set the tone. He didn't do it. And then the interception at the end of the game. So I don't know. It stings. It hurts. I will say this as we sort of, pivot a little bit here. One thing I have come to terms with over the last couple of days from our conversation Saturday and beyond is just I've had to kind of look myself in the mirror and realize why I think I'm torn on whether or not Ryan Day's the right man for the job or not. And I think it solely comes down to we all keep saying Ohio State can get any coach they want. And you can get a coach who's going to do the same thing Ryan Day's doing, win you a bunch of games in the Big Ten, but lose the game to Michigan. But the problem is, like we laid out, you're looking for that coach that's going to give you that 7% that Ryan Day isn't giving you. He's giving you 93% of what you want. Where's that other 7 coming from? And I worry that they're not going to find that coach. And then you're doing the same thing over and over again. And we know this game is all about recruiting. Like you don't want to see people like Brian Hartline leave because what does that mean for your recruiting? You don't want to see people like Larry Johnson leave because what does that do for recruiting? And I truly am living in my fears with the whole thing where I'm like, yes, I understand where there's concern about Ryan Day at this point, and there's valid reasons to say it's time to move on from him, as much as there's reasons to argue that he probably isn't going to get moved on from. But I also I worry if Ohio State makes the wrong choice? Like, what if they end up like I look at Texas. Everyone said like Texas was too big to fail when Mac Brown left, right? And then they hired Charlie Strong, and like they were just every year it was like, is Texas back? Like asking that question over and over and over again. I don't want to go through the years where you're sitting there wondering that, and Texas is still winning, like your program's still winning like 8 games a year, 9 games a year. Sometimes you have a down year, but you're just waiting for them to finally get back to prominence. Like, you need to have a flawless transition to the next guy who's going to take you past what Ryan Day is delivering you to this point. So that's why I think it's a big dilemma for me. And without that, I would probably say, yeah, move on from him. I would, but I'm just fearful that as much as we say it's going to be easy to find that next coach and get more, are we sure about that? I've had to face that the last couple of days.
Yeah, but that's called an appropriate fear. Like, like equal parts here for my being on the fence with Ryan Day is we can't just look at his record and say, well, it doesn't matter. It does. Like, he's lost, what is he, 3 Big Ten games, and they're all to Michigan. And it would be different. I would feel different. If he had never beat Michigan in 2019, I might feel different. But to me, what you just showed was that's a rational fear, because it's not just them, right? It was Miami firing Larry Coker, although that was kind of trending that way. It was USC seeing Pete Carroll go back to going back to the NFL. Like, look at the great runs in college football. And I think it's hubris to say, well, Jim Tressel pretty much gave way to Urban, and Urban gave way to Ryan Day. So how tough is it? This isn't Mark Helfrich. Okay, this isn't Chip Kelly at Oregon turning into the bleep show that Oregon, and when I say bleep show, I mean it's really taken them until now to get back to where they were with Chip Kelly, some 3 or 4 coaches in almost a decade. So, like, I think what you just said is a rational fear. Like, that should be the fear. And I think there's this idea, and it happens in the NFL all the time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I you're right. Like, it is a rational fear, but we kind of talked, we hit on Saturday a little bit. Like, everybody just assumes that it's if you move on from Ryan Day, that the answer is just walking through the door and it's all going to be rainbows and butterflies. And like, I'm saying, I don't know if that's true. Like, we even kind of hinted at that on Saturday. Like, if you move on, somebody else will be there and you'll be okay. It's Ohio State. But I'm saying, like, we've seen numerous programs. You just listed off Oregon. I mentioned Texas. There's others out there that did take steps back when they moved on from a coach that was getting them close to that point.
Well, and I think there's this misconception that simply because there's going to be a lot of interest in the job and that almost anyone would take it, that means you're going to hire the right guy. You know what I mean? Like, I think just because you have a vast pool of candidates and you can speculate about Luke Fickell, and I think the Vrabel thing is a pipe dream. He hated recruiting when he was here. I think he's an NFL guy, and I think things might be over in Tennessee, but like, it's the same money, right? It's not less money. It's not more money. It's going to be the same money if he takes it.
Probably.
No, in college. Way more stress.
No, I'm saying at the NFL level, less stress.
So, like, let's say those first 2 guys don't go. Like, I just think if you're going to move on from Ryan Day, you better know when you're moving on who you're going to. Like, this isn't we're going to open up and we're just going to talk to everybody. It's no, you better have the search done when Ryan Day's still in the building. And then if you can't get one of your top 3 guys, then don't do it. Like, it's that simple. And I got to be honest with you. I don't think anything would happen. Like, I think people wanted him fired today or tomorrow or sometime this week. I think when it could happen, and when I say, and not even a firing, a parting of ways could be once we find out next Sunday what happens. And then I think then you could put the wheels in motion. But even then, act covertly, because if word gets out that Ryan Day is either going to be fired or could be fired, the portal's open. Like, we're seeing it. I mean, you look at the amount of guys that today have had their head coach axed that are already in the portal. And I know you think, well, it's Ohio State. You can get no. Okay, it's not. The point is, you don't want the new coach to have to come in and immediately go Deion Sanders and dip 30 guys out of the portal while also trying to land his first recruiting class here.
Yeah.
Right? That's where all of a sudden you go from 11-1 in the Big Ten this year to maybe having a step back here next year, which is needless. Yeah. Ohio State should reload And I feel like if you go there now, you're going to open up Pandora's box. And again, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means every time you think about turning things over, there is an incredible element of risk. And the risk has to be worth it.
I also think, too, the NIL stuff is important. Like, it is part of the context of how these things, how the sausage is made on college football these days. But we also can't forget that at the root of all this, it is a relationship business, man. And like, you talk about the talent Ohio State's bringing in, changing coaches. We all think it's just seamless. Oh, next guy comes in, it's the recruits are still coming, but you don't know that. Like, if he doesn't put the right staff together, that's also going out and building the relationships and trying to convince the players like this is the place for you, then it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all just going to keep. The Ohio State machine doesn't necessarily continue because of that. So, like I said, I think based off this conversation, like, it's a valid fear. I agree with you. They shouldn't just fire him now. It's got to be sort of a wait and see type of approach. And I don't think it would happen now anyway. To your point on, if you got to kind of know who your candidates are, it's going to take you getting through bowl season to kind of know everything that would kind of be at your disposal. So I don't think it's necessarily even on the horizon. I also think it's interesting, Nick. We haven't heard a peep. Pete Thamel hasn't mentioned anything. I would have thought, like, going into that game, because they were there. I mean, he was reporting inside the big house on different coaches and, the Texas A&M job and all this different stuff. There was nothing mentioned about Ryan Day being on a hot seat or, this game matters towards him, his job security. Like, there was none of that. So I'm of the belief that he's probably just safe anyway for a lot of the context and reasoning that we put out there. Gene Smith retiring, 12-team playoff next year. He's going to make it anyway, like all these different things. But yeah, I mean, I think my stance on it is this. I am ready to move on from Ryan Day, aside from the fact that I do worry about who you're bringing in next, because you just don't know if it's actually going to be as seamless as everybody's making it seem like it's going to be.
Now, we also have to play a snippet of today's morning show. If you guys have not heard the Ken Carman show with Anthony Lima, we're going to play a snippet. And Lima actually goes into detailed reasoning on why he thinks Ryan Day should be fired and why it's time to move on from him. And you can actually hear that on the Odyssey app, 923thefan.com. But we just have to play a snippet of his shot at your boy, Nicky Dubs, Nick Wilson here from today's morning show with Ken and Anthony.
He could talk about it from 2 to 7.
It was not my call. I'm happy.
By the way, where he and Nick Wilson will both agree on one thing, that Ryan Day's perfect for this rivalry. Because Nick Wilson is somehow continuing to defend Ryan Day. So you guys can have a Ryan Day love fest from 2 to 7. I'm sure the fans will appreciate that. He could talk about.
So, shots fired. And Anthony Lima, I called you out of my own show. I'll call you out here. Simply saying I'm not ready to fire Ryan Day isn't the same thing as a Ryan Day love fest. And I think what Lima is the face of is spoiled Ohio State fans. And I want you to have high standards. I'm not saying don't have high standards. What I'm saying is when a guy has that record and it's not even a thought for you to fire the coach because, well, it's not good enough, I'll be honest with you. That's exactly the kind of thinking that gets every great school in trouble. And I think to me today, the most homeristic thing you can do is just open up a microphone, fart into it and go, fire Ryan Day. Oh, well, I don't like Ryan Day. He's not from Ohio. I don't give a damn that he's not from Ohio. The guy's from New Hampshire. What can you say poorly against people from New Hampshire? I think we've had presidents from New Hampshire. And this idea that only Ohio people will understand. Nick Saban didn't go to Alabama. But yet he walked in to Alabama and has done pretty damn good. And I get it. There's more struggle for Ryan Day the first 4 years on the job than there was for the first 4 years of Nick Saban. But that's not the point. All the Buckeyes fans, when Ryan Day got the job from Urban, were behind it and waved the banner. And then all of a sudden, you had to watch a coach learn on the job. And now, too rich for my blood. Nope. No more first-time coaches. Well, here's the thing. You're already invested. You're already there. So stop being spoiled little babies. We are. It's okay. Just look in the mirror. Admit that you were spoiled little babies crying about an obsessive amount of wealth here. You're not that far away from beating Michigan. And yes, Ryan Day probably has to adapt a little bit. But like, for all we know, we could be 6 weeks away from Ohio State, Michigan in the national title game. I'm not expecting that to happen, but that could happen. And if Ryan Day beat them in the national title game, it would be the single biggest win in the history of the rivalry. A win greater than anything Jim Tressel did, which I feel dirty saying. A win bigger than anything Pope Urban did, and I feel dirty saying that. So I am not Ryan Day apologist, Mr. Anthony Lima. No, I'm simply not a nut job who's just panicking 2 days off a loss that, while it ain't great, it's also not the most despicable loss in this rivalry. Not even top 10, not even top 20. You're the great Anthony Lima is being the biggest homer in the room, and I feel like I'm watching a hero die.
Watching my hero die. Oh man,
he's the man that taught me to be a little contrarian, and here we are.
He even took a shot at the fine folks down at 97-1 in Columbus, who
97-1 the homer.
Yeah, I think he called him 97-1 the homer.
That's pretty good.
Oh man, I was like just catching strays for just being the Columbus sports station. No, I will say too, I think that's well said by you. And I think your point is well founded on sort of where your stance is on all this. I actually thought the conversation him and Ken had on the morning show was interesting, where they talked about how Ryan Day just maybe isn't bought into the Michigan rivalry the way that he says he is. I actually think they were wrong even about that. Like, I think that Ryan Day is bought in. I almost think he's like too bought in. Like, I understand when Urban was here and like Tressel was here, he made a point making the rivalry a thing. And when Urban was here, it was the same way. And there was talk that like Michigan just didn't care as much as Ohio State did, right? That was kind of the thing when they were winning 14 out of 15 years or whatever it was. And then I think Harbaugh obviously kind of changed that. But yeah, I mean, like, I actually think that Ryan Day cares so much. It's the same thing with the shot he took at Lou Holtz and the whole, like, how we talked on this show about how he had to reiterate how tough his team was all the time. He kept saying it was his buzzword, toughness and grit. Like, those were the things he kept saying about his team. And I think it's the same thing with this rivalry. Like, every step of the way, he knows how much he's being judged by this rivalry and this matchup alone, and that Michigan is in his head, that he brings it up at every turn, how invested they are in that game and how it's a constant thing and it's 24/7. And, you know, the minutes after the game ends, you're already focused on the game for next year. Like, all those different things, he brings it up so much that I think it's evidence that they are in his head. And I think that shows itself on the field when he coaches against that team. We saw it on Saturday, Nick, like him not going for it on 4th and 1 first drive, the end of the half sequence, like just little moments. It shows that they are 100% in his head, because I think he cares that much, because he knows he has to care that much, or else his job and his ass is on the line, that it affects the way that he coaches. So I think it's the opposite. I think he does care, and I think he cares so much that he has let it fester, and he's let it just balloon into this thing inside of him, where now, like, he looked dejected after the game, rightfully so, but he looked absolutely dejected beside himself, like he had no answers for how he's going to beat this team and what was next for him. I think it's more so that he just has it set in his gut and in his mind that this game matters so much, and he's let it get so big and internally that it actually is a detriment to him. That's what I believe.
I think he's let Ohio State fans get into his head about it. And I think it's pretty normal. I think it's unbearable to live in Columbus and to be in Columbus and be at Ohio State when you've lost any amount of games to Michigan in a row. And I think he feels the pressure of that, but I think that's him getting into his own head. And I do think he needs to adapt a little bit. I think he needs to embrace a little bit the Ohio State part of this and try and bring in Buckeyes to help teach the team. I think it's the same extension of like some of the entitlement with Urban. Like, Urban's teams, guys, they cared more about getting to the NFL than they did anything else. It's just that I think Urban properly prioritized and made it a point to explain the Michigan rivalry. That seems to be missing right now.
Well, and if he didn't care, he might kick you. So you gotta...
or goose you if you were a hot young co-ed. Give a little Irby 2 digits, as it were.
Can I also go ahead?
But like, I to like this idea of, Ryan Day doesn't care enough about the rivalry. No, I just don't think he's going to emote the way you want him to. And every time he does, it's weird. Like when Ryan Day tries to show you some sort of emotion, it comes off like a 12-year-old kid trying to emote for the very first time. Like it's just not who he is. He's like, I hate to, we always make the Ryan Day, Kevin Stefanski things, but they're apt.
Yeah.
Like they're not guys that have that kind of emotion. That's not who they are. And you have to be okay with that because that's who he is. It gets weird when he tries to do the Lou Holtz thing. And it gets weird, like, the born on third base thing, or like when he tries to like rub people's nose and poop, he does a bad job because it's just not who he is.
I do think that was kind of Ken and Lima's point. Like they believe it's not who he is, and that's why he's more of an NFL guy, and that he's just posing as a coach that cares. But that's
also that's snobbish. Well, he's not from here.
Yeah.
Well, he actually coached on this staff twice as long as Urban Meyer did, but that Urban Meyer did as a grad assistant under Earl Bruce, and he actually was the quarterbacks and offensive coordinator coach twice as long. So he wasn't just some gopher for Earl Bruce, the 12th best Ohio State coach ever, respectfully. Like I got to be honest with you. I understand to some degree the idea of Ohio State guy, Michigan man. I understand it. I also think it's a bunch of pretentious a-holes that I think it's just another weapon to use against Ryan Day. And I didn't hear that the first 2 years the guy got the job.
Last thing I'll say on this, because the other thing I know Lima talked about was Ryan Day faking it, but also that he didn't think Ryan Day had the team believing they could win that game. And I actually disagree on that as well, because maybe the last 2 years it seemed that way, and I'll concede that, like where they just thought they were going to throw the footballs out and beat them because they had more talent. This year, it felt like they actually thought they were going to beat them. Like the touchdown late in the game, Travion Henderson scores the touchdown, and you could tell like they were showing him kind of in the backfield, and he looked laser focused on like, hey, this drive is working. We're going to punch this thing in on the long drive that they ran it 8 straight times to score. Like I thought that the guys looked focused. I think you get reactions like Marvin Harrison Jr. at the end of the game where he's just kind of sitting there. I think the fact that Kyle McCord shakes off the early interception, has them marching down the field on another potential game-winning drive like he did in Notre Dame. Like, I think they did believe they were going to win. And I think they believed they were going to win on that drive. And if not for Donovan Jackson letting in a pass rusher, maybe they do. So I disagree on that as well. I think this year of the 3 years that he's lost, I'm not going to be that unfair to Ryan Day on that. I think he actually had him ready and believing.
I actually want Ohio State to make the playoffs more this year than they did last year. And last year was the better team.
I agree.
CJ was the better quarterback. But this year, I would like some sort of immediate vindication. Because I think, and like it all depends on where you'd be ranked and all that. But like, I think you'd have a hell of a chance to because I just don't think there's a great team. I don't think Georgia's great. I think they're incredibly talented, but like I don't think they're great. I don't think Michigan is great. I think Ohio State is on the same par as Michigan. I think the two teams out of the Pac-12 have been completely disrespected this whole time. But like beyond those 5 teams, like Florida State, even with Jordan Travis, I didn't think they were elite. Yeah. I think Texas is a good team. Without Quinn Ewers, I think they're a good team. I don't think they're a great team. I think Alabama, we saw in the Iron Bowl, if not by
they one lost. That was some of the worst. That was some of the worst defense I've ever seen by that quarterback.
It was the pass of a century by Jalen Milroe. So, I think there are 5 championship caliber teams in college football. But I don't think this is TCU if Ohio State gets in. I don't think it's, I don't think they're I think what you have to avoid is you can't let Michigan State in from a couple of years back. You can't let TCU in. Like, you can't let the paper tiger in this year. And that's why I think really bodes well for Ohio State if a couple things go their way.
Is this the reason why the 12-team playoff will actually be everyone's harping on how it's going to be a terrible thing and these games lose their luster? But is this actually a reason why it's going to be a good thing for the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry? Because the team that, I think it is, the idea that you get a chance to exact revenge maybe a week or a couple weeks later, I think the instant vindication actually adds to the intrigue of the rivalry to me, because you don't now have to wait a year to find out. You might find out a couple weeks later, and it's like there's a motivational factor there. To me, that's intriguing. I know other people maybe disagree, but I love that about the fact that it's going to expand.
Yeah, I think people in college football, like college football fans, are just bad at accepting change.
Yeah,
I think
they like it the way it used to be.
And sometimes they're right, but like in the case of NIL, they're dead wrong. College football has never been more popular. In the case of the transfer portal, they're wrong. Yes, it's hectic. Yes, it's changed the landscape and in some ways affected competitiveness. But like, I got to be honest with you, between the transfer portal and guys being able to play until they're 70 and collect a pension from the college school that they play for, I think we're actually seeing a more competitive landscape. So I can't wait for the 12-team playoff. I wish it was this year. I really wish it was.
This would be a perfect year for it, because, like you said, there's not a great team this year.
Well, and I think we wouldn't have to sweat the idea of, well, should Alabama really be ahead of Texas, or you know what I mean? Like then it just wouldn't matter who was 7 and who was 8, and then you could give Florida State a chance with Rodemaker to see what he can do. You could give Texas with their backup a chance. So I'm looking forward to it, and I don't think it's going to make the college football playoff any less interesting. I don't think it's going to make rivalries any less interesting. So we have to continue on here. We obviously have the Michigan Panic Meter coming up. We also have 4th and Short coming up. More conversations on the way. But first, a quick message from our sponsors.